This is Teachers Talk Radio.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Friday Morning Break with John Gibbs. My guests this week, Charlotte Parsley and Will Hamilton, who have just completed their PGCE at the Faculty of Education at Cambridge University, and I suspect are enjoying a very nice but rather anxious summer as they contemplate beginning their career in teaching. They helped me explore what schools are for and why should we teach.
This is Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in at ttradio.org or download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in with Teachers Talk Radio.
And we're back, and you're listening to the Friday Morning Break with John Gibbs and my guest this week, Charlotte and Will. And I'm so pleased you could join us because my aim on this show, as my listeners, my regular listeners will know, is to explore what teaching is for and what schools are for. I'm a retired teacher. I did 38 years of teaching. And so it is the beginning and the end of the profession. And we can explore what teaching is from that perspective of someone who's just decided to join the profession. So Will and Charlotte, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
It's absolutely my pleasure indeed, and thank you so much again for taking the time. Now, you have both just finished your PGCEs in teacher training, and you're at the very foothills, and congratulations to both of you. I said this to Will before we started, and Charlotte, you as well. You've got jobs. So I'm going to ask you the first question. How was that? How was the job hunt? Was it difficult, easy? Charlotte, I'll start with you.
So I'm actually moving back to York. So I've done my teacher training in Cambridge, and then I'm moving back to York, which is where my family is. So obviously when I was searching for jobs, had to go back to York. Obviously it's all in person. So it was really fun. I really kind of enjoyed looking round schools and seeing a little bit about what kind of different schools are out there in York. So obviously because I'm from there, I did know a couple of the schools that I kind of applied to, which was lovely, and knew a couple of the teachers who were actually then in the school that I was applying to, which I think is really important when you're going to enter a new job. If you know somebody who's kind of experienced that, the dynamic of the school, it really, really helps. So that was really helpful for me.
Did you find you were sort of welcomed with open arms? This is goodness me, someone who wants to be a teacher, please come in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the north it's definitely a little bit different, I think, than sometimes in the south. So there is definitely less schools. So sometimes it can maybe be a little bit trickier actually getting a job in a specific location when you're like, oh, I definitely want to be here in York. But it was really great, and knowing somebody who had been in that department specifically, they were able to kind of help me and guide me to find the job that was right. So that was brilliant.
And Will, what was your experience of the job hunt?
Well, I consider myself incredibly lucky with my job hunting process because it's the school I'm working in come September is the first one I applied to. It was the one school I was applying to at the time, and I was lucky enough to be offered that role. I say to my friends in class, it just must be beginner's luck, and they're all too kind, saying, no, it must be more than that. It must be more than that. But getting into my head that that's happened is still something I'm coming to terms with, all in good ways, I promise. But that was my experience of it.
I like the confidence. The clear confidence people showed in you there, Will. You know, it must be beginner's luck. Why did they hire you?
Well, it's a lot of faith, isn't it? But actually, it's a real privilege to be offered that at this early stage, and it's sort of like a tacitly understood agreement that you're going to do your best and do it to the best of your abilities, and to try not to let people down because they've put a faith in you. They've looked at you and said, we're going to take a chance on you. Don't let us down.
That's interesting you should say that, because are there moments, I mean, it's often said that teaching is beset by the imposter syndrome. And after 25 years of 30 years of teaching, I can remember waking up at the ends of the summer holidays thinking, I can't do this. I'd have that kind of dream where I go into classes and I think, I don't, what me? What do I know? You know. So do you ever think to yourself, goodness me, what? I can't. Am I me a teacher? Is that real?
So for me, while I'm thinking about it, the thing that still I find quite baffling and in equal parts baffling and amusing is whenever I'm in a room and I'm sort of the teacher, quote unquote, in charge at that moment, and then people start saying things like "sir," and I still as a gut reaction, I turn around like, "What do you mean, the older bloke behind me? Like, surely you don't mean me, you know." So that's for me the moment that hasn't quite gone yet.
I actually had an experience when in my very first job. It was in a sixth form college in Stoke-on-Trent, and I was in my early 20s, but I looked young. I did look young, and I remember being called out by a teacher who just started. He'd been there for a couple of weeks, and he said, "What are you doing in there?" I said, "Actually, I'm a teacher. I'm allowed in here." That was awful, but still, it's more embarrassing for him, I think. Charlotte, how do you ever think to yourself, what have I done?
Well, I mean, I really love working with young people. So I think I do really get enthused when I'm in the classroom. But I think this 2.5 month kind of break is definitely going to be, like you said, at the end of the summer holidays, you go, oh my days, this is me now. I'm going to have to do this day in, day out. And you're like, I don't know if I can still do it. But I think also definitely for us as well, we've normally had like our mentor in the room, and suddenly this new transition where we're going to be the adult in the room. So that's something that we're going to have to really get used to, like you were saying, Will. When they say sir or miss, no, we are them now. Yeah, that's us. So I think that would be something to really get used to. Like, we don't have anyone to fall back on, but I think it will be like such a learning kind of journey, and we will do it because we'll have to.
Did your school? I remember when I got my first job. Obviously, at the interview, I said I was completely able to teach all the history syllabus that they had there, even though that wasn't a particularly strong area of mine. But I didn't give that away at the interview. So they gave me a great pile of books to read over the summer. Is there anything like that? Have you been given, Charlotte, stuff to do?
So I am a science teacher, but biology is my specialty. So I kind of did biomed at university, and when I've done my PGCE, it's been biology, like the stream. But obviously, quite often when you apply for a job, you're a science teacher, and a science teacher teaches biology, chemistry and physics. So yeah, very similar to maybe your experience. You kind of have to teach things that maybe aren't quite your specialty, but obviously I still do have the qualifications to teach them, and still something that interests me so much. But it will definitely be a challenge and like a challenging experience, but one that I'm excited for, because it means I'm learning kind of as well, and learning new ways to kind of engage the students as I learn with them. So hopefully it will be a good experience.
Yeah. Well, how about you? Are you putting it out of your mind? You're going to sort of a week before you go into the school think, well, I better think about this, or is it going to fill every waking moment till now in September?
Well, yeah, I like to prepare, but they do say diamonds are made under pressure, don't they? If I left it a week before, I'd just do the best planning ever. I'd be focused like a laser beam. No, I do think about it. I'm at this very moment thinking about how I'm going to be planning the material. I find out all the nitty-gritty little details of it in July when there's an induction proper, but I anticipate a lot of my summer being spent just getting familiar with my timetable, where am I going to be? Because, it's an incredibly physical job. It's not just intellectual. You're having to run from classroom A to classroom B, and I'm going to have to figure out where all these classrooms are in the school as well. So there are many different things that are going around in my head at the moment, which I'm sure over time will become resolved, and they'll just be part of my daily routine rather than things I think about now.
You are listening to the Friday Morning Break with John Gibbs, as we share the experience of Charlotte Parsley and Will Hamilton, who are joining the profession as new teachers this year. Yeah, it is. It is surprisingly physical teaching. I mean, and not just the clearly those teachers who teach physical education, but the up on your feet all day. You know, just the simple idea that I think I haven't really sat down really today, and constant moving of and so on. As soon as I retired, I started putting on weight. Well, weight had hardly changed in years. I thought I'm expanding rapidly in my retirement, which is actually a good thing. Charlotte, back to you. The one thing that struck me as you were talking there, a recent guest of mine the topic was, she was an academic. She done a study that students of science don't think of themselves as scientists. So I love science. They love science. They love hearing about science. They love black holes and dinosaurs and stuff like that. But then they say, well, do you want to be a scientist? No. And particularly girls. In fact, girls shown, and another study was that girls shown an image of a woman in a white coat says, yes, she's dressed up as a scientist. And shown as a man in a white coat, he's a scientist. Do you think you'll, have you experienced that during your career? I'm sure there's a question there somewhere, but I'll make one up as I get there. Is that something you experienced?
Well, yeah, for sure. I was going to say, actually, when I was a student myself, I wasn't actually taught science by a woman until I got to university. And I'm so lucky that my mum is a scientist, which I think is what's given me that science capital, which is basically, like you were saying, the ability to think of yourself as a scientist. And I think that's kind of been a bit of a buzzword that we've kind of spoken about on this course, particularly like giving students science capital, giving them the ability to be like, I don't just like this, but I want to be a scientist. So I think I've tried to not think of it too much in the sense of like, because I don't want to almost play into that stereotype, if you know what I mean. I want to kind of be able to just present kind of, the content and just make sure that everyone feels like they can be part of it. But I think there's really something to say for role models as well. And something that I think I remember saying in my interview when I was applying to teaching was I really want to role model a woman in science, because I think it really can have a massive impact without the words. Do you know what I mean? So just seeing me doing the science, being the scientist, and then getting the students involved with that, they can see themselves hopefully in the future in that role.
Is it, for both of you, I'll start with you, Will, is it a frightening concept, this idea that to some extent you will have a role model influence on people's lives? I mean, I can remember encountering, in a very nice way, during my career, young people who'd say to me, they would see me in the street and they'd left school years before and say, Mr. Gibbs, I remember your lesson on such and such, I've never forgotten it. And I thought, well, sorry, I've completely forgotten you. I never gave that away, but I've no idea who you are at all. But that feeling that I'm going to influence people's lives, oh my goodness, Will, do you think of that?
I think it goes back to the word I've used before, which is a privilege. It's teaching as a whole is one of those jobs available in civil service, in public service, I should say, which gives you that rare opportunity to really, really understand young people and to positively influence their lives where possible. Of course, you always strive to make a positive impact. And I often say to people, I think teaching to a certain extent and being a teacher is a lot like being a parent. Now, what I would know about that exactly is absolutely zero right now, but I'm pretty sure that what you do as a teacher isn't all that dissimilar from what a parent does. You look after them, you guide them. You're not just your subject specialist, you're so much more. A credit to any teacher who has somebody come up to them and ask for advice, to confide in them about something they're worried about, you name it. And I think it has to be earned, and I really welcome that. The work I'm going to have to put in to earn that trust and respect. And it's a sense of satisfaction that you don't necessarily get from other jobs. It's the cliched line, it's not like other jobs, but it really isn't for that reason. In this case, for that reason, yeah.
Yeah, I think any job will say, well, our job's particularly unique, but I'll go with you completely on that. I don't think teaching is quite like any job. It's both lonely in the sense that it's you and the students. On the other hand, you're part of a tremendous team that works together, and there are all sorts of other paradoxes and things we could get into. So, Charlotte, you don't want to go in front of the kids and say, I'm a woman and I can do science, quite like that. But on the other hand, that will be one of the roles you'll fulfill, whether you like it or not. You'll be a positive role model.
Yeah, hopefully. I really hope so, in science and just as these students develop. I'm really excited to have a form group this year as well. So not just the science side of it, but just to be able to develop and walk alongside these young people as they mature and develop. And like Will said, like being a parent, we probably see them more so than their parents sometimes. If they have parents who are working late and stuff, we're the ones that are there consistently every day. And so, like Will said, it's a privilege to be able to help them and guide them and support them through what is probably some of the hardest years of their life, being a teenager. And yeah, we've all been through that, and so we hopefully can relate to them and support them like the teachers did for us.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
You are listening to the Friday Morning Break with John Gibbs, as we share the experience of Charlotte Parsley and Will Hamilton, who are joining the profession as new teachers this year. Yeah, I thought that was particularly true, Will, what you said there about there is more to teaching than just teaching, and I think that surprised me, even though I thought I knew that when I went into teaching, was how much of my time would be taken up with the lives of people, being a sort of, it's in loco parentis, being that parent, and all the things that now, of course, anyone listening to this has said, you're probably shouting at the radio. What kinds of school and what age groups are you teaching? We didn't get into that. So, well, what kind of school and what age groups are you teaching? And what are you teaching?
Yeah, so years 7 to 13, modern languages. So where I'll be heading, I'll be specialising predominantly in Spanish and French. But because I also did Japanese at degree level, it's like my fun party trick language. In other words, if they ever need something like that, I can throw that into the mix and spice things up a bit linguistically.
Oh, that is great. Yeah, I can just imagine that, with just wowing the kids with a bit of Japanese.
Well, it's even now, having studied and used the language for years, I still get the same kick out of using it. I don't know anything else to say apart from shock value. Because the joke is that, what do you call someone who speaks 3 languages trilingual? What do 2 languages bilingual, 1 language English?
Yeah, well, yeah.
So it's nice to actually. So building on what Charlotte was saying, I think part of the job is really being a fierce advocate for your subject. And in my case, languages is one that is pretty shrouded in fear. People could have run screaming from it sometimes. They think it's not for me. I can't do it. I have to have a certain brain, etc., etc. So being that voice of positivity about it and saying, no, this is doable, this is fun, and look what it can do for you.
Well, you did it, and that is no small thing, as you rightly say, in this country. We do have a particular problem in this country with modern languages, and it's for obvious reasons, such as when you go abroad, most people speak English very easily. I certainly rely on that. I just go a bit louder in English, and then someone in English knows what I'm talking about. But also, there are all sorts of cultural reasons and so on about being an island and our history and a sense of historical uniqueness. But I'm sure you're going to confront students who'll say to you, well, I don't need it. Everyone speaks English.
Yes, it's certainly a risk. It's certainly something you have to face up to, the possibility that people just be completely against it. But I think again, a lot of that comes from how difficult it is viewed as. That's not very good English, is it? How tricky it seems to be for a lot of people, and it's this misconception that it's almost impossible and you have to have the right brain for it. And I think the selling point I use for it when I talk to people about the subject is because for a lot of my colleagues in linguists as well, so depending on who you ask, why you do languages can change. The pretty salient reason I find when I talk to people is that they do it to understand other cultures and where the differences are. But I'm completely opposite. I do it to understand where the similarities are, because there's that perception sometimes that with the different language comes the totally different people, comes the totally inaccessible people. There's that they're nothing like me. Why would I try and engage with them? But they really are. You know, we're all painfully similar to each other. Actually, that's the newsflash you get from learning languages. Actually, we're all really like each other. We all feel pretty much the same things. How we express those things just sounds a bit different and looks a bit different on paper. And accessing that, giving people that same kind of mini epiphany is a big motivation for me.
Lovely thought. Yeah, I like that. I like the. It was wonderfully comically appreciated in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they will put the little fish in their ear and they can all understand modern language. That every language in the universe is understood by everybody, and it caused more wars than any other thing. As soon as we could really understand other people, we appreciated why we didn't like them. No, I absolutely, I absolutely take it. Charlotte, what kind of school and what age group and so on?
So I'm going to be teaching year 7 to 11. So the school that I'm at only goes up to GCSE. I can teach A-level, but not at the school that I'm going to be at in September. And it's a C of E school. So that would be lovely. So there's a really strong ethos there as well. But yes, I'll be teaching all 3 sciences all the way up to year 11, which is really exciting.
Ethos is a phrase that has always been there throughout my teaching career. People have said to me things like, very important, the school ethos. We have a strong ethos in the school. We have a what do you think that, Charlotte? What does that mean to you? How do you say this school has a strong ethos? And I see that happening around me.
Yeah, I think it's just something that kind of like glues that community together. And I think I really saw that on my interview day. The students really kind of seem to have a shared vision. And I think that's what it is, having a shared vision, because a school is just like a ready-built community. And I think having a vision in any walk of life is really important, but especially when you're younger and you're kind of exploring yourself, being able to come back to that shared vision and know that you've got a group of people that will support that and be there as you develop is really important.
Yes, and when you see it, you know it's there, but it's very hard. But it's hard to describe, and it's hard to sort of find a policy. Say let's have an ethos. Well, how many times have I heard that over the years? It's hard to know, but it's easy to see.
Yeah, that's it. And it's when you see it, you kind of it's something that you can feel when you kind of walk through those doors or into that community, or just kind of how they are practical. So yeah.
When you did your teacher training, and so go back a year, does that seem a long time ago, a year ago? But when you did your teacher training, some of it would have involved teaching practice, going out into schools and being the teacher. That I remember being absolutely terrified by, to be perfectly honest. I can remember sitting at the beginning of my PGCE course, and the teacher saying, "Well, you do 8 weeks of this school and 10 weeks of this school." I thought, oh my goodness. I'm not ready. Charlotte, did you feel ready as you first walked into that classroom? Did you feel supported and so on?
Yeah, I definitely felt supported, but I think there's always that kind of initial fear when you're doing something new for the first time. So even if you have worked with young people before in different settings, like being a teacher and doing it for the first time is so alien, isn't it? Because you've for your whole life seen the other teacher as you were the student at the front of the class, and it never probably looks that difficult, but when you're on the other side of it, you do get that initial anxiety and you think, can I do this? But I think what it is, it's just kind of the more you do it, the more you feel relaxed with it. And I think that's it, just being able to get through those first few lessons really is like the hardest thing, but it really sets you in good stead. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you feel, the more you feel like you can try new things, the more you can get to know your students. And it just takes time and practice, like with anything.
So you had a very positive experience of teaching. I mean, active practice of teaching. It didn't. Were there any lessons where you came out and thought, "Oh dear"?
Of course, I think if any teacher says that there isn't a few lessons where they've come out and thought, "What was that?" then they're lying, because it is something that sometimes you have massive highs and everyone's engaged and it works really well, and then you have lows where you think, oh, I thought that was going to work amazingly, and it just doesn't. And that's okay. But I think that's what the training year is all about, is giving you the opportunity to try all these things and not think, oh, I can't do this if you have a really bad lesson. It's saying, let's try again, let's do it again tomorrow, and maybe we'll see improvement. And I think having that support there is really important.
Yes, you do have to be very forgiving of your own frailty and failure, and not expect every lesson to be the whizzy, brilliant, extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things one of our lecturers said at the start was like, a bad lesson doesn't make you a bad teacher. And I think that's kind of just sat with me like throughout. Whenever you have that bad lesson, it doesn't reflect you as a whole teacher. So yeah, you do have to be forgiving of yourself, but also be able to pick yourself back up and go, let's try it again.
Will, how was your teaching practice? The actual moment when you were like, in you go, there's a class.
So in my background, I've done an awful lot of performing. I've spent most of my life doing like choral music and singing, and every Sunday I'd have to be the cantor, which is just the fancy name for the person who does the presses and responses of like Anglican choral music, and it's incredibly exposing. You stand there by yourself in front of a church/chapel/cathedral, sometimes of any number of people, and it's just you. And that years ago was just terrifying, awful. But like teaching, it has a performative aspect, and you have to put on that face for a while. You have to assume that personality that isn't necessarily genuinely you yet. But the beauty of that is that the positive experiences you have with that more confident version of yourself means that the real you gets a kick out of it. So then that fake confidence to begin with, over time, becomes real confidence, and you stop pretending, sort of quote unquote. You then have that real confidence that allows you to walk into a classroom, stand in front of people, and know what you're doing, and feel sure of yourself. And we were talked to. I'm sure it was similar for Charlotte. You get that swap in experience in what your priorities are. I should say at the start, you're constantly thinking about how do I come across, but then by the end of the year, you're more often thinking, how are they learning? How are they doing, not me? Which is that lovely transition, I think.
Absolutely. I think it's that sense of, well, I remember teachers saying to me, well, John, just remember, kids will know a fake. Be yourself. And I thought, I'm not sure I want to be myself. I've got to somehow be more than myself. So finding what is it I'm doing? Am I a performer? Is this teacher, John, one of the roles I'm going to play? And I think it was to some extent a role, and it was one that became natural, and that was the key. I think, well, you said it rightly there. You're acting in a way, but you have to perform as the teacher, but you have to on the other hand, that has to become part of you. That's true. I remember that was it Groucho Marx who said the main thing in life is authenticity, above all authenticity, and if you can fake that, you're made. So I think that there's a degree of that. If you can master the authentically inauthentic, then you're there. Charlotte, did you feel that you had to draw upon performative skills?
Yeah, I think to a degree everybody does, and I think sometimes you're not sure, or like you don't really recognise that you're doing it until you kind of take that step back out of the classroom, and then you can kind of breathe again. But like Will said, I think towards the end you the pressure gets taken off you, and you become more focused on the students. Like just like kind of looking back at that progression, like those first kind of initial targets were very like me driven, like be able to stand in front, direct instructions, and then by the end I'm like, am I making sure that these activities are adapted to my students and that their outcomes are the best that they can be, and that they feel included and safe and supported within that classroom, for sure. And then you kind of feel like you've embodied that teacher persona, and it's kind of, like you said, it is part of you. So I think that's just a natural progression. You can't quite say when that day is, but you kind of are able to look back and see that it's happened.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
BBC News website covers pressures being faced by providers of summer holiday clubs and activities as the rising cost of food drives down the value of support for pupils on free school meals. BBC News research shows that 67 of 92 councils have cut their support or kept it the same as last year, leading to a drop in value when food inflation, currently at over 17%, is taken into account. Across all 4 home nations, offers vary, but support has ended completely in Northern Ireland. In England, many councils offer vouchers to those eligible. The vouchers can be spent in supermarkets, but inflation means that the price of many foods has gone up. Further pressure has been added to families as those eligible are also finding it hard to access places on the holiday activities and food programme in some parts of England. The programme offers support with activities and food, but some providers say they don't receive enough funding to cover the increasing levels of need. One provider in West Yorkshire said they only got funding for 20 places, but had 70 children who would qualify on their waiting list. The news site further reports that a controversial decision to scrap free school meal help in Wales during the holidays could end up in the courts. The charity The Public Law Project is acting on behalf of a woman in Cardiff who says she and other families had no time to prepare for the short notice decision, and that the government did not think about how to reduce the impact of the change made. The Welsh Government insisted that the announcement made in March gave fair warning to those affected, but a decision to reinstate the programme for the May half-term appears to have caused confusion for many, as there was no clear announcement that this was the final extension of the scheme. The Guardian covers a report from the United Nations which calls for a ban on smartphones in schools. UNESCO, the UN's Education, Science and Culture Agency, said there was evidence that excessive use was linked to reduced educational performance. It went on to suggest that high levels of screen time had a negative effect on children's emotional stability. UNESCO concluded its report saying, "Not all change constitutes progress. Just because something can be done, it does not mean it should be done," referring clearly to the idea that technology as a whole, including artificial intelligence, should never supplant face-to-face interaction between students and teachers. The report said that countries needed to have clear objectives and principles to ensure digital tech in education was beneficial and avoided harm both to individual students' health and, more widely, to democracy and human rights. UNESCO did accept that online learning stopped education melting down when schools and universities closed during pandemic lockdowns, but added that millions of poorer students who lacked internet access were still left behind. Countries banning smartphones include France, which has had it in place since 2018, and the Netherlands launching a ban from 2024. Former Education Secretary Gavin Williamson called for bans in England in 2021 as part of a crackdown on poor student discipline, but he was criticised as failing to understand that schools had had policies regarding phones in place for years. In the USA, CBS News reports on changes to Florida's social studies curriculum for 2023. The news website states that the new curriculum will include lessons on how slaves developed skills that could be used for personal benefit. The lessons will be taught to students in 6th to 8th grade. They include teaching students on understanding the causes and consequences of the slave trade, the similarities and differences between serfdom and slavery, and the contact of European explorers with systematic slave trading in Africa. Vice President Kamala Harris voiced her opinions on the curriculum changes, calling them an attempt to gaslight us. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis dismissed Harris's criticism, and one of the co-authors of the new curriculum said, Any attempt to reduce slaves to just victims of oppression fails to recognise their strength, courage and resiliency during a difficult time in American history. The new curriculum has been criticised heavily by many who see it as just another example of the Conservative agenda which seeks to quash views not aligned with its own. Finally, Schools Week report on a police investigation into cyber attacks on exam boards Pearson and OCR, which led to the arrest of a 16-year-old boy. Both boards had exam papers extracted from their systems and sold online. The youth was arrested in early July on suspicion of theft, fraud by false representation and computer misuse. He has been released on bail until early October. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, over the next few episodes I'm going to discuss connections, so let's get wired, or not, as the case may be. The plan was to do this in order of most essential, however a chicken and egg question came first. What is the most essential connection, the internet or your display device? Without the internet, there'd be far less interaction. However, how does this compare to the ability to display your screen to the class? I asked you on Twitter, and @Elizabeth J. Rowan was the first to answer with, I'll hasten to add, the most popular choice, the internet. There's 1001 ways to present or display information. I couldn't agree more. And talking of more, @More to Learn questioned my question, asking, why do I have to choose? Showing the expectation we teachers have for both. However, when asked to choose, the answer was the internet, and give me a whiteboard pen. So, let's talk about the internet and the difference it makes to teaching. We have a connection to the biggest network of networks at our fingertips, indexed by powerful search engines that return results in seconds, even ranking them in an order of likelihood of them containing the answer we are looking for. Obviously, we need to swerve adverts and fake news from time to time, but what a resource we have. For those of us willing to admit they were around, 20 years ago, teachers were still transitioning from chalkboards. Every teacher was in the process of getting a laptop, the projector was on a trolley you wheeled into the classroom, and social media didn't exist. You couldn't just take a virtual tour inside a volcano or go on an interactive 3D journey through the digestive system, have a guided tour around a highly secure Google storage facility, drop a jelly baby on a map, walk around the coast of Spain, Italy or Australia. The internet has brought us all of this, and harnessing, filtering and presenting its power to our pupils has become an art that we have had to master. So here are a couple of tricks you can use to keep yourself organised. Control+D bookmarks a page. But did you know that if you make a folder of bookmarks, you can right click and open all? All of your bookmarks in that folder open as new tabs. This is great if moving from one lesson to another on a different topic. If you use a lot of YouTube clips and websites, Wakelet is a great way to organise collections of links and clips. It's free to make an account, and you can share collections via links with pupils. I'd like to finish with a question. Do you know the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web? Tune in next week to find out. Why not get in touch? Follow us and tell us what you want to know about tech. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
You are listening to the Friday Morning Break with John Gibbs, as we share the experience of Charlotte Parsley and Will Hamilton, who are joining the profession as new teachers this year. Yes, and it can become a little bit like you can incorporate the teacherly persona a little too readily into your life. So outside of school, you find yourself explaining things to people in a very teacherly way.
You do, yeah. And everyone goes, "Oh, that was so teacher. You had your teacher voice on there." And I'm like, "Oh, did I?" Because you just embody it so much.
It was highly infuriating to my wife over the years. I mean, a natural inclination to mansplain things anyway, but as a teacher to launch into a structured answer, don't need to be taught this. When you tell people, well, I'm going to become a teacher, so that now sounds believable. And how do people react? So I know that you both have fairly, well, I'll say it, stellar, successful academic careers behind you. So far, you've done very well. And as such, teaching was one of many options you could have pursued and could pursue. So when you say to people, "I'm going to become a teacher," What was the reaction? I'll start with you, Charlotte.
I think from my family, I had a lot of support. My grandma was a teacher, and so kind of she's always talking about how much she loved her profession, which is always a lovely thing to be able to say. Oh, and then I've become a teacher, which is lovely. I think sometimes from my friends and kind of like people that I know that are more my age, it's kind of like, whoa, that's so brave. Oh my gosh. Wow, that's a challenging career that you're going into. Like that's amazing. And so sometimes I'm like, there's almost sometimes a little bit of like a almost negative spin. People kind of perceive it as a very, very challenging and difficult lifestyle and vocation that you've chosen to go into. And sometimes that's kind of, I guess, quite upsetting, because I'm like, I don't want it to be seen as something like that's going to be have a real negative effect. I want it to be a celebrated thing, and because it's something that's so important to society, and it contributes, so much to society. Good teachers, mean that we have a better society in the future. And sometimes I don't know if there's a little bit of disconnect between that, which is maybe, part of why, there is a recruitment crisis, and people, they're struggling to recruit because society doesn't deem it as, I guess maybe even an academic or a kind of a viable kind of career. But I think having spoken to a lot of people and kind of discussed and explained what this year has entailed, and being able to have that opportunity has helped people to see that this is a great thing to go into, and there's so much opportunity there, and so much reward as well.
Well, it was a career direction that was proposed to me a few years ago, actually. I was very late to the party. I was the classic, oh, this will never be me. Surely I could never do that. But family for a long time was saying it would suit me and that it would be something I should really seriously consider. So actually from family and friends, it's well received. Actually, they welcome it. They think, oh, you would make a good teacher, which is always lovely to hear. So the amount of the possible stigma I haven't quite yet been on the receiving end of, but I'm aware that it's there. I'm aware that a lot of people say the same things that I or Charlotte would, and get the reaction of, what on earth are you thinking? What are you doing? I mean, surely that's too difficult. But the motivation for me as well is that actually what a lot of people say about other careers is just there's the B word, boredom. They experience boredom in one way or another. There's that lack of challenge that goes on. And that just doesn't happen in teaching. You are so many things, but you're never bored, ever. So that's something that has the that's another appeal. And that's why I think, as I say, again, when I say it to people who know about teaching as a career, they are knowledgeable about it. They know what it entails. They think, well, then you're going to be challenged, but that's still a good choice. That's going to keep you, firing on all cylinders up here, up in your noggin.
I can absolutely endorse that. There was never a boring day. There was plenty of ups and downs. So we can list the gamut of human emotion from despair to to being ecstatic. But there was never boredom, and lots of occasions when the unexpected happened. You didn't expect kids to do that. For anything from fall out of a window to all the things that you can imagine happening in a long teaching career that you didn't expect when you got up that Monday morning. Yeah, it won't be boring. One of the you're absolutely right. You both said it. One of the reasons I'm asking that question is because of the retention crisis, the recruitment crisis. Two things are going on in teaching, and they've been going on a long time, on and off. I don't know that I've ever known there not be a kind of recruitment crisis in teaching, but this is particularly acute. And getting people to be teachers and getting people to stay in the profession. This is probably an unfair question, actually. Do you see yourselves as career teachers, or do you see yourself as give it, see how it goes? I mean, or is that just a silly question?
I personally see myself as a career teacher. I almost now can't really see myself in in anything else. I feel like I've found my thing. I love being around young people. I love being around people. And when I'm in the classroom, I feel kind of like I come alive. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I love my subject. I love being in that environment. I love being able to see that progression in people and being able to be part of that and help them reach their full potential, whether that's in science or whether that's just that they can get up and come to school on a day if they're not feeling great. Like, do you know what I mean? Each student kind of has their own little success that they need to reach, but I want to be part of that journey, whatever it is. And I think I've come from a different job. So I didn't go straight into teaching from university. I've worked in healthcare for a while, and I've also worked in the civil service. And they were great. Like, I'm not putting them down, but it's not where I felt like I thrived. It's not where I felt like I was able to do the best I could do as a human. And I feel like with teaching, I feel like I've found the thing where I can do that and where I hopefully can excel and be the best version of myself and help other people do the same. So that's where I'm at the moment. I really hope that this momentum keeps going, and I understand with any job, like, there comes a point where it's the daily grind, but like I say, that is the reality of any job. You speak to people in all different careers. I've got friends in science, I've got friends in sales, I've got friends in healthcare, and we all have challenges in our jobs. We all have things that make it difficult, but it's kind of about how you overcome them and how you view it and your mindset about it. So I really hope that the momentum that I feel right now continues, but I also am on board with fighting alongside teachers, because education is important, and I really want to be part of it, and I only want it to get better, not worse.
Yeah, I think that at its best, and I can give this out completely honestly, it was a job where I thought, my goodness, they're paying me to do this. This is just a brilliant thing to be doing, and that isn't playing down. There is something clearly very serious going on when an awful lot of teachers leave quite soon after becoming teachers. I wouldn't have blamed you at all if you'd said to me, I don't know if I want to be a career, or even if you'd said, I don't visage myself a long career. I think it's perfectly reasonable for people to enter the profession saying, I'll see how this goes. Will, how do you see yourself as a career teacher? Again, it's an unfair question, but I'll use it. And a career teacher, or someone who is going to see how it goes?
Well, what I've learned this year, the year just gone, is that education has those two crucial dimensions that can coexist. One being the practical dimension, which is teaching, standing up in front of a class, doing everything that a conventional quote-unquote teacher would do. And then there's the academic side of it. Education as a human endeavor. What does it mean? What does official versus unofficial knowledge mean? What is school for? What is it? All of those big questions. And Charlotte and I have been looking at those two things together simultaneously all year. So what that has meant for me is, having found that I have a real passion for both and a real interest in learning more about both. What I'm saying, I think, for the answer to answer your question most immediately, is I think the practical side is something I will do for a while. How long that while is, I don't know. But I do know that at some point, whether it's in the next year, 2, 3, 4, however many years, I would like to spend some time doing the more academic side of things, looking into education as put it this way, the more philosophical sides of education as well. And I wouldn't want to be just in one or the other forever. So I'm giving you a very annoying answer, I'm afraid. But that's my take on it, and I would love to really, really get to grips with both sides of that coin. Yeah.
No, my answer when I first went to teaching would have certainly been, I don't really imagine myself teaching forever. That it would have been something that I would have done for a while. I definitely had some vision of myself doing other things. That sounds like yes, but they got me. So yeah. Will, you might think you're going to do other things, but once you're in, no. I definitely thought that. Well, I don't like the expression the organisation teach first. I think I like them in the sense of what they're doing, But I don't like the expression "teach first" because it implies that you wouldn't really want to. If you're a highly intelligent person like you two, clearly you don't want to do this forever, do you? Give it a go first before you get a proper job. I think give teaching a try is a perfectly reasonable observation to make. The thing, I mean, there was a survey, we talked about this in a previous, as your mum will know, well, on Teachers Talk Radio, being one of our most devoted listeners. Well, no, we talked about the recent survey of teacher life survey. I've got the title wrong now. But it came out that the thing that burned teachers out most were not so much the actual teaching. And Charlotte, you described a very delightful experience there being in the classroom. And yeah, absolutely. There are a few things nicer in some ways when it's going well. There are some few things nastier when it's not going well, but there are a few things nicer when it's going well. But outside the classroom, a whole lot of stuff. And as I went on and became a more experienced teacher, the classroom stuff got increasingly easier. The difficult lessons became fewer. And the plan Bs were always in the back of my mind in that way that they weren't always so readily available in the first day teaching. But the thing that got worse over the years was the data, the collection of data, the bureaucracy, and the sense of being monitored. There's an awful lot of discussion at the moment in teaching in surveillance. And the teachers I said it's a lonely profession, but it's not as lonely as it used to be in a sense. When you closed your classroom door, you're in your own little world, but not so much. I mean, was there a sense that you met when you met other teachers or when you were in your schools that people said to you, "Oh, why are you going into teaching? It's all paperwork these days." Charlotte, did people warn you about the stresses that are not teaching?
Yeah, I think when I said that I was going to go into teaching, I'm really fortunate to know a lot of teachers actually. And so I think I went into this knowing that it was going to be, not just the classroom. There's so much more outside of that, the admin side of it, the workload side of it, the data side of it, keeping on top of targets, making sure that students are making progress, all of this. So I wasn't unaware of that. I didn't go into this thinking, oh, this will be fun. I like working with young people. Great, let's just give it a go. I think I'd kind of built up to this, and I had spoken to a lot of people, and so I was very aware. But I think it's different hearing it, and then obviously like being in a school and like kind of seeing it. And obviously there were meetings and department meetings where we had to do curriculum plans and admin stuff that you could see that it was a tick box exercise and stuff that wasn't necessarily people's passion. It wasn't what they went into teaching for, but they knew they had to do it to tick the box to make sure that they were going to have a job the next day because it was something they just had to do. And that is a side that I've definitely experienced, but I definitely know that I'll experience a lot more in the next few years. It is really difficult, and it's something that I'm aware of, and I think will have to be something that I'll have to, as I approach it, understand how I'm going to deal with that personally, because it's not something, I guess, in your training year that you've had too much exposure to, but it's not something that I'm unaware that's going to happen. But I know that it's something that I'm going to have to talk about and be able to manage so that it isn't the thing that wears me down.
Absolutely, yes. And I think that all across the country, any teacher listening to this said the tick box exercise will be a familiar phrase to them, an idea that you're doing certain bureaucratic activities because it's necessary for them in their own. They serve themselves. You're serving the collection of data. The data isn't serving you. Well, that I think that can be a problem in any organisation, probably. But teaching has become somewhat more bureaucratic. I would say that. That's an unfair thing to say. Will, did you experience that? I mean, did you feel that there was a sense in which the teacher said to you, "Oh, for goodness sake, it's not the teaching that's the problem; it's everything else"?
Well, one of my colleagues was saying very much something on those lines. They were saying it for me, it's the being in the classroom doing all the teaching is the most gratifying part of it, and having to upload all the data to various pages was just draining, and draining in the extreme, and again going back to not what I got into the profession for kind of line. And I would agree, it's because in my albeit limited experience thus far, it has become seemingly a very bureaucratic profession. I think it's that almost the the neoliberal, well, I would call it the neoliberal priority of the government to turn education into this product, where parents and students are the consumers, and they're pitted against, schools are pitted against each other to be competitive in these league tables. Which one is going to stand out, which one should you send your children to, which then has knock-on effects for who does or does not actually get the best education because funding is increased or whatever. And it does alarm me. It does alarm me because then you get to the point. I was reading someone who was saying, was it Terry Wrigley years and years ago? I mean, this has been going on for 40-ish years, as far as I can understand, with inspection becoming a more prevalent thing. That what can't be measured anymore, the data you upload, if it can't be measured, it can't count. If that makes sense, that's been really interesting to me.
Things are validated by the ability to measure, so that reaches back into your practice, so that you do the measurable thing. Yeah, I understand that. In a sense, it's a shame that that's the case, and I think you've identified something that I would definitely agree with: the neoliberal competitive nature, turning schools into competitors with each other. As you look ahead, technology will change the schools. Do you think there'll be this? Do you think there will be this as your career goes on, the same as they are now? Classrooms and so on. What would you imagine schools of the future to be, Charlotte?
So that's a really interesting question, actually. So at the school that I'm going to, every student has an iPad. So that's already, something that every student has access to. They obviously have access to the internet kind of constantly. Whereas some of the schools that I've been training in, obviously it's been kind of the opposite, like very much more paper-based stuff. Whereas the school that I'm going to go into will obviously be a lot more there'll be a lot more technology-based learning. And I think it can be really helpful for kind of creating independent learners, because as teachers, obviously, we want to facilitate and guide. But if we can help these students be able to do that, we can kind of help them do that and then give them the kind of access and resource to do that on their own. That is ultimately what we want to do. So I guess technology can be used for the better, but obviously I don't think it should, replace us as teachers. I still think that human input is necessary and important.
Yes, the AI teacher. Let's yes. The hologram. Yeah, I experienced it just towards the end. I, like a lot of people, I retired. I was 63 when I retired, and it was coming up. I think I'll retire soon. But lockdown did that for me, and it was sort of the lockdown, being at home, teaching online, and thinking, I can stop now. And I don't know quite what it was, but it certainly wasn't a very enjoyable experience teaching online. And people often said, "Well, why have school buildings? We can teachers. There can be all sorts of technology that teaches you outside of school." So, Will, how do you think? I'm going to share another anecdote with you. When I was at school, I remember going into modern languages classes, and they said, "We have in our school now." This is like 1972, and they said, "We've got the language labs," and the kids all sat in little cubicles, and they had tape players in front of them, and the language teacher sat at the front and could randomly listen in on you, so you didn't know whether they were listening or not, and you'd have to be repeating back in Spanish, as it was in my case, repeat back in Spanish, and they would, and then record it and listen to a thing and record it, and then every now and again your earphones. So I got earphones on now. The teacher's voice would say that again, and don't say that, because obviously kids were swearing in and recording very rude things, but the language lab, they were all ripped out a few years later. It didn't work. There wasn't a technological way of teaching languages. What's your view on the technology in language teaching?
It can be a real aid. There's so much access to authentic material because of technology, thanks to technology, I should say. YouTube is a really rich resource. I mean, because YouTube, again, is used by sort of the younger generations as a lot now, and it's there, shows different accents of Spanish or different vocab. Whereas before, it would have been, right, you got to find the recording on the textbook, and that was it. But actually, there is a real wealth of resources that technology can offer that I always try and steer people to get the best out of it.
The odd thing about teaching is that there's all sorts of technologies come in, and yet it stays persistently similar. Someone from the 19th century walking into a school would know they were in a school. They wouldn't confuse themselves anywhere. The whiteboards might confuse them, or the smart boards, or the laptops. But ultimately, there's a teacher, and there's 30 or so kids. So my final question to you both is, why teach?
I spent most of my school life doing European languages, and then when I went to uni to undergrad to do Japanese, it was a whole new ballgame, an entirely new thing. It wasn't just a question of putting a new train on an existing set of tracks. You had to ask for planning permission. You got to get the different things wired. The syntax is the other way around. Everything, and I had to do everything from scratch, and that granted me, I would say, the best perspective I can get on what it really is like to struggle, to just see a jumble of letters and to think, what on earth is going on? Teaching isn't because you don't teach because you've got to the point of knowing everything and now it's time to share. You teach because you're still going, you're still learning. And making that clear, I think, to your students is vital.
Definitely, like, your experiences as a human kind of do direct you to certain things in life. Like, I definitely think, the things that, I've done as a young person and then as a student have kind of helped me and guided me here to where I am today. But I think what I've learned definitely on my PGCE year is that every teacher looks different, and that there isn't like one thing that, a person that is definitely a teacher. There isn't one personality type. There isn't one way of doing things. And I think that is really important, and that we can definitely learn and train to be in this profession. And I think that's really important to know, that I think most people could, with the right support and structure, be able to do this job if they are passionate about their subject. And I think that's really important, because in this day and age where we, are in a kind of recruitment crisis and stuff, I think it's really important that people know that this is something that they could learn, and it's a skill that they could develop, and something that they could be supported through. And that it's so fulfilling, challenging, yes, but so stimulating. You learn so much about yourself, but also about your subject and about humans and about development. And I think that door should be left open to people, and they shouldn't write it off if they don't feel like they have the right personality.
So it's been a lovely conversation. Thank you very much. Anyone listening to this, I think, will have learned a lot, and I've learned a lot, and also enjoyed listening to your perspective from the foothills of the teaching career. So, Will and Charlotte, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us on.
And that brings to an end this week's episode of the Friday Morning Break from John Gibbs, as I explore what schools are for. This week my guests, Charlotte Parsley and Will Hamilton, new teachers who'd just begun the profession, having completed their PGCEs at Cambridge Faculty of Education. I asked a simple question this week: why teach? Why should anyone consider coming into teaching? And indeed, the main story at the moment is that it's quite difficult to persuade people to come into teaching, and many people leave. Rather than explore that, I wanted mostly to make the case for teaching. And I think Will and Charlotte did it brilliantly. Both were clearly aware of the powerful role models that teachers are. A lot of the teaching takes place outside the curriculum. Of course, I know that most experienced teachers are aware of this, but it's great to be reminded and hear it so enthusiastically and optimistically expressed. I also enjoyed Will's observation that through modern languages we learn how different as well as how similar we all are. It's quite clear, as expected, both Will and Charlotte are a little nervous, apprehensive, but full of a delight in the possibilities of teaching. And that's really the way it should be. I also thank Will for the use of the word noggin. Underused. We should use it more. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can hear it again on Spotify or on Teachers Talk Radio. Listen again. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. I certainly did.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.